And we are live. So, hello everyone. I have a very special guest today, Mordy Oberstein. He's from Israel, and he's here to help us understand how we can, grow our business organically. Modi has been CMO of Rank Ranger in the past. Right now, he's doing a super hit podcast called SEO Rant. I love it. I love the way he delivers the podcast. Modi, over to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background.
Sure. Hi, I'm Mordy Oberstein. I used to be the CMO of Rank Rangers, one of the SEO tools, and I'm currently the SEO liaison, or you want to call it the SEO community manager at Wix, which is a major website builder. And my job is basically to advocate for the needs of the SEO community internally at Wix and to help educate the SEO community as to how the Wix platform is evolving around SEO. So I'm all about SEO, and on the side, I do things like the SEO Rant podcast. I contribute to the Edge of the Web News podcast every week. So definitely check out Edge of the Web News or check out all of their content, all their podcast content, which is great. I do a lot of data research. It's kind of how I got into content and SEO. But I do a lot of writing about where the algorithm is heading, how Google as an ecosystem is evolving, which sort of touches on, I think, what we're going to talk about today, content and SEO.
Yeah, Google is extremely important, especially considering the current times when, organic is playing a very important role when businesses are struggling to spend money. And I think organic is a way to, scale your business. I would want you to talk a little bit about how organic scaling is extremely important.
So I'll put it this way. The relationship between your website and, let's say, Facebook or your website or whatever social media platform or even paid advertising is not as intrinsic as the relationship between your website and Google. There's an inherent relationship between your website and organic search. The two, they go hand in hand together. So it's really the natural starting point. But by the way, like, it doesn't mean to say that you start organically and you'll end up bringing in traffic overnight. It's a long process. It takes, generally speaking, about 6 months to start bringing in real organic traffic. So yes, you should definitely be paying attention to social media marketing. There's a great post that Rand Fishkin put out over at Spark Twirl maybe a week or two ago about the various curves and how quickly you're able to gain traction through various mediums like paid, like organic, or like social media. So it definitely pays to have a multifaceted strategy. But again, paying for something as you're starting out, it's an investment. It's literally an investment, and you may not want to do that. Whereas there is a lot of opportunity out there if you're careful about it. In other words, let's say you sell shoes online. If you want to rank for shoes online, that's a very difficult keyword to rank for. I would imagine you're not going to rank for that, and that's okay. But think about what makes your business unique, what your unique selling point is, where you fit into the grander scheme of things, where you can differentiate yourself, and target that. Like, what makes your shoe company better than other shoe companies or different than other shoe companies? And then start creating content around that, and not just product content. Obviously, you need product content, but create informational content around that. Build a brand, which I think we'll probably get into this because one of my big things, but build a brand around your content. It'll help you in search. It'll help you create the content that you need to be creating in search. And it'll help you create enough content that Google will start to see you out there, understand you, because what you're really trying to do from an SEO point of view is to have Google understand who you are. So the more content you create around your very specific niche, the easier it will be for Google to understand, oh, this website talks about this. And then your organic journey shall begin, I guess.
Yeah, Molly, in fact, you took a very good example, and I would want us to discuss a little bit more about, business use case, because that helps the audience understand how this whole thing works out. Because a lot of small businesses, they start and they put a couple of articles and they think that why isn't much traffic coming to my website? And like you said, sports is an example, which is highly competitive keyword, and it is difficult to get traffic. You said another point that it's not just about products. A lot of businesses, what they do is they create homepage, they create product pages and some ancillary pages, and then they think, why am I not getting enough traffic or leads or stuff like that? So talk to us about how to see your small business grow organically, and conversation around the product.
No, so this makes a lot of, okay, this is a great conversation because it's something that I think about a lot at Wix. because we have a lot of, I mean, listen, that's what we do. We sort of create a platform where you can not have to worry about the more technical aspects of SEO. For example, so if you have a e-commerce site and you want to create product listings or product pages, so we'll automatically create the schema markup so you can appear as a rich result for you out of the box. In other words, what we do, in John Mueller's, there's a Search Engine Journal article about this where John Mueller from Google talking about this on Twitter, where the CMSs that are out there, whether it be Wix, whether it be Shopify, generally do a good enough job, or do a pretty good job at taking care of the technical aspects of SEO for you. Depending, it's a spectrum. Not every CMS is equal. I like to think at Wix we do a very good job about this. But for the most part, most CMSs will generally do a good enough job for you. The better CMSs will do a very good job for you. That means that you can focus on running your business. It also means that you can focus on creating content, which is what you as a business owner should be doing. Because when you're a business owner, you are the expert. Whatever it is that you do, let's take shoes. Let's just stick with shoes. You're an expert on shoes. So you're the perfect person for Google to be looking for content, because you're an expert on that topic. There's a lot of content on the web. There's a ton of content on the web. I legitimately think there's a gap. And if you look at some of the things that Google's doing, I think they recognize there's a gap between enough content and enough quality content. So while there's plenty of content to show for any given keyword that you search for, there's not enough good content for Google to show. And that means that you need to be thinking about, and again, it goes beyond products, because yes, most product pages, once you get it set up right, you have your title, you have the description, you have the image, you have things like shipping details, you have things like return policies. There should be a lot of information that's on your product pages. It should be very prolific. It shouldn't just be you have your H1, you have a product description, and you have a couple of specs. You should have a table full of specs. By the way, a mistake that I see a lot of sites make is they have a table of specs, but it's an image. It's not an actual table of specs, which means Google can't read it, because Google doesn't read the content in the image. So make sure you actually create a table of specifications and have things on there like shipping policies, like return policies, like pickup policies. Let's say it's COVID, right? Well, people maybe can go to the store, but they don't want to go to the store. Do you have curbside pickup? You should be listing all of that information on your product pages. But you also need to create ancillary content, or content that supports your product content, for two reasons. One is users, it's actually helpful to users. So let's say, again, you're selling shoes, and let's say you're selling a very specific kind of shoe. There's all sorts of information people need to know. How do I go about buying the best shoe? How do I go about buying the best shoe when I can't go to the store and actually put it on my foot? There's all sorts of information that is generally needed, that your users want to know. So you should write that content for them. It helps support the purchase. So like a very simple case. You're selling shoes. You can't actually go to the store and buy the shoe anymore. You can't put it on your foot. So how do I know if I'm ordering the right shoe? So you should have a guide on your website that walks the users through that process. It helps. So the person comes to the site, sees the shoe they like. They don't know what to do now. You can have a link on the product page that says, here, buying guide to buying shoes online. That'll help support the actual sale itself. At the same time, you want to be able to create content. You want to have content on the page, on your website, that will help Google understand who your website is. And having a blog really is a simple blog that talks about all of the very specific things that are really relevant to your users is a great way to tell the search engines, hey, this website is about this. It helps give your website identity. It's twofold. It gives identity to your site, to your users, and it helps give identity to your site to search engines. So having content outside of the product can help the search engine better understand that, hey, when someone searches for something around your product, that you're a relevant website, if you do it right.
Absolutely. You said very useful thing, Mordy, and you said that identify content gaps, because many a times we think that anything that we want to know, Google already knows about it. That means someone has already written about it. So it feels like, which might not be actually true, it feels like that the information is already there. Why should I, and in fact, instead of why, I should ask, how should I build my website that I am unique, something that you touched upon, that have a unique brand value, but how should I create content that looks unique to Google, because I'm just starting, I'm so small, and I don't even have all the technical stuff that Google requires, like domain authority or depth in content, etc. So
So yeah, I mean, look, this is a problem that I think people get hung up on this a lot. You'll generally hear advice from SEOs. Okay, so how do you figure out what content to write? Well, go to the SERP, which you should, see what other people are doing, and do that. Well, then why would Google rank you? They're already ranking that. They don't need you for that. So I definitely think it's a very worthwhile idea to go to the SERP, see what your competitors are doing, see what should be there. And by the way, you can profile. Like, by one of the recent things that I saw for the one of the last product review updates was Google really likes when you have a buying guide on a review page, right? That gives users tips about if you're going to review refrigerators. So you should have a set of tips of how to go about what you should consider when buying a refrigerator. Great. Every website is doing that. Every website that's ranking is doing that. How can you differentiate yourself? That's really the question. And sometimes you can't, by the way. Like that, you need to be honest. Like in this particular area, I cannot differentiate myself. There's nothing unique I can offer here. And that might be a keyword that you go after over time when your site's more established, when you have more authority, when Google understands who you are and that you're a player in this field kind of thing. But if you're trying to get started, you're trying to gain and trying to bring in traffic, so you have to start with, look, if you don't as a business understand that you have a unique identity and you have a unique selling proposition, then what are you selling for? Why are you in business? You should not be in business just to sell. And I think it's a point in general people need to realize. SEO is not an independent science. SEO is part of your overall branding. It's part of your overall business strategy. So you already should have a business strategy that you're just going to apply to SEO. So if you're go back to the shoe case. If you're selling shoes, what makes you better? And focus on that, build on that, and incorporate that into the content that you're creating. But in general, it means thinking, what's not on the pages that I'm looking at? What could I be doing better? So if you go to the SERP, if you look at 10 competitors, if you see, okay, they're all doing this, what can I add on? What could I be doing better? What's not there that if Google would see it, would say, wow, this page is different and it has everything the other pages have, but it has more.
yeah, I mean, absolutely, that makes sense. And I will get back to our shoe example, the case study. So I am setting up this business online. I have my homepage and product page. I went to the website and I researched about the things you said, like who are the top three people coming in the search result. I see that they are covering, say, they are covering content in depth. They are covering content about 2,000 words. They are covering about guide, etc. And then I, of course, like you said, will figure out my unique selling point and build my product pages and home pages accordingly. Now, how do I go about, building a content strategy? I understood how to get started. How do I go about building a whole lot of articles, blog section? How do I go about it?
So people get hung up on this a lot. We'll talk about top of the funnel content, middle of the level funnel content, bottom of the funnel content, all sorts of content models and content strategies. And I think it's all a mess. Throw it out. I mean, there's a great post that Google put out a while ago that goes through the funnel is messy. There is no beginning, middle, or end. People come in, they go out, they come back in, they go back out again. So to think of your content strategy as this very linear thing, a very logical thing, I think is a big mistake. And it's really, I understand why we do it. We do it because it's simple. It makes sense, right? It's something like, hey, if you want to tell me how do I create a content strategy, here's 5 easy ways to do it. And it's very structured. I am very much against structure in general as a life
Okay.
philosophy. I'm kidding. You should start with your users, and it starts with empathy, and it starts with understanding, okay, who am I speaking to? What are their problems? And what do they need? What information do they need to solve those problems? How can I speak to them? And that will ultimately result in you creating the right content. In other words, let's say your shoe example. So who am I targeting? Who are the people looking for these shoes? Well, it's people with, I don't know, let's say orthotic problems. Okay, so what pain points do they have? Empathize with them. What are they looking for? What is their life like that they have this foot problem? They need this kind of special shoe that I sell. and target them. I don't mean target them because that's a very sales kind of word. I mean, create content that speaks to them, that solves their problems, and that takes into mind their emotional considerations. Really level with them one on one. Like, hey, you have this problem. I have a solution to this problem. And that can mean creating content on your sales page that speaks to that. That might mean creating content in a blog post that talks about the various situations and the various problems that you might have if you have this problem and how you come in as a solution. And I think what will naturally result is you'll create content that speaks to people at X level or X stage, at Y stage, at Z stage, because you're creating content because you understand your user. Once you understand that user, you're going to understand, well, there's multiple users, or there's multiple types of users, or there's a user that might have this consideration. And now that I solve that consideration, what's their next consideration going to be? What's their next problem going to be? And let me write content around that. Let me address that. Once I address that, will they have another problem after that I need to address, that I need to consider? So you're naturally creating the content that we talk about as part of the funnel by naturally empathizing with your user and understanding where they are at every specific point across their journey as a person. And that's really as simple as that. And it's really not simple because there's no shortcut around it. There's no tool. There's no trick. There's no content strategy. There's no content structure that will help you do that. The only way to do that is to actually understand who you're talking to and being very specific in understanding what problems they have and predicting what the next problem will be.
Mordy, what you said, it really makes sense, and it's extremely important point. I think very less SEO folks talk about this empathy map. And I hear what you're saying. In fact, how I'm seeing, what I'm just trying to translate it for myself. When you say that empathize and create those first core pages that your customer would be looking for, that means that would mostly have your product page because they are looking for your product information, the frequently asked questions, the guide that you said, if shoe, we are talking about shoe and we are not able to experience it, how will we help them virtually experience that? I think
Right.
that's the core set. And then, like you said, empathize more and more. To me, it's 2 3 concentric circles. You cover your core articles, you cover articles around it, and then you start talking about category. That's a
Yeah.
very useful way. And I think what you're saying, even to empathize, what happens is in marketing we talk a lot about consumer research, but when we talk about SEO we completely forget that consumer research, that research only plays a huge role till the creative of the brand, the creative design, the
Right.
campaigns, communication, etc. But I think you are making a very extremely important point, and that's that maybe we should use those insights when we are creating the page.
Yeah. Look, I mean, you will naturally, you're going to say, look, I'm selling a product. Okay, so who am I selling it to? Well, I'm selling it to a person who has this issue, or I'm selling to a person who has that issue, or now has this issue. When you're creating that landing page, you're going to have them in mind. You're going to create elements on the page that naturally appeal to all those different types of people. Or you might say, you know what? This page appeals to this person or solves this person's problem. Maybe I need a separate page, or maybe I need a link to this page to deal with the other problem that's going to arise for another kind of user. So when you start thinking about your users and the problems that they have and the needs that they have and how you solve them, and then you start to say, okay, well, now how do I present this on my website? It's really just two things. It's very simple. It's presenting information to the various users that you have and considering their problems. And now say, okay, now I have this medium called a website where I need to present them the information. How do I best get that across? And once you have those two things in mind, that's it, right? You say, okay, I'm going to create a page that deals with this person. But what about the other person? Well, how do I get them to that next page? Well, I'll put a link here, or I'll have a separate page and I'll try to rank for that page. Whatever it is, you're going to consider your various users, and you're going to understand that your website is the medium or is the vehicle that will get the information to the users, and understand how to best structure their website or structure the web page in specific to address multiple users, or to address a user who now has this problem and now needs the next step. And that's all it really is. And there's no magic formula. I think the magic formulas that we have come from that. Well, in generally speaking, when you have this, now you want to add that. That's because the person who originally came up with that theory or that construct understood that you have multiple users, you're trying to speak to their various needs, and you're trying to push them to the next point, or you're trying to say, okay, someone who came to this page who's not at this point, let me give them access to information that they actually need. And that's really what it comes down to in SEO. It's all SEO content is, right? Because now you're just trying to say, okay, how do I address this to a search engine instead of a person? That's where SEO comes in. In 2021, it's really the same thing. By the way, there's a whole other point that we could talk about is that your content is meant to contribute to what the user is looking for, what they want. But your content, another way to think of it is, it's your brand, it's who you are, and it's who do you want your users to see you as? What do you want your users to see you as? And creating a brand through the content. I know we think of brand as like, okay, I'll put a banner here, I have a cool logo, that's my brand. No, your brand is what you say. It's who you are. So your content is your brand. So another way to think about this is, okay, so I have people out there in the world. I have my website. It's where my content exists. What do I want them to feel about me? What do I want them to know about me? What do I want them to say about me? And your content is exactly that. It's going to be above anything else, above any logo, above your social media. The content on your website will be how people think about you. And if you're juvenile with that content, or you're thin, or you're not serious with the content, you're trying to just bank out a bunch of blog posts, people will see you as a non-serious brand and they won't buy from you. And all of that speaks to how to optimize for search engines, because it's all one and the same thing. It all, for the most part, completely aligns.
Love it. I already have three questions in my mind that I will ask you, but I'll take this question first. So the question is, even if we write articles using empathy, Google depends on users clicking on our link to judge if my content is good, right? And users won't come unless Google ranks my page. Like in the next situation, absolutely.
So, okay, so first off, Google officially does not use clicks as part of its direct ranking factors. So Google says, hey, machine learning might look at clicks and say, okay, this kind of content is not what people want. This kind of content is, but it's very top level. It's very categorical. Bing does say that they do. So that might be, so it's a little bit different for Bing than it is for Google, but let's just stick with Google for a minute. It doesn't work. Like, you have to create content that, look, so let's assume for a minute that Google is looking at clicks and Google is looking at your traffic. Well, if Google understands traffic from all sources, so go to social media, right? Put out a post, get people to stay on the page. The only way to get people to stay on a page, if you're assuming that Google is looking at those metrics, which again, they are not, is to create good content. There's no other way around it, right? So even if you think that it's good, I need to show Google that people are not bouncing from my pages. The only way to do that is to go on social media, get people to link to your site, get Google to say, oh, maybe we should rank this site. Tons of people are looking at this site, and then actually have good content. But again, Google's not actually looking at that. There's no, like, it would be impossible. Google understands there are new websites on the web. And again, it's all about site identity. The more content you create, the more you're able to show that you're creating content around a very, very specific focus. So if you're writing about shoes, your content should be very specific. It should be best things to know about shoes. I would not write that content. It's too general. Create a very specific identity. Go to be cliche about it. Target long tail keywords. Target your content on long tail keywords, because that means you're going to create content that's very specific, it's very nuanced, and that content is going to speak to users. Again, it's going to be content that's more empathetic because it's very specific and nuanced, as opposed to top 10 things to know about shoes. That's very unempathetic kind of content. And once Google sees that you're creating good content consistently and you build up that profile, you will start to rank. And the more you rank and that traction builds, it just builds its momentum. It just builds on itself. That's the only way to get started. There's no other way around this.
Yeah, I think, like you said, that first 6 months after this to solve for this chicken and egg situation, you put a lot of hard work. Just keep putting, and it almost feels like that nothing is happening. But I think these are the months where you are actually creating a launch pad.
Yep.
Uh,
Look, think of
Right.
it like a
That,
marriage. Google's trying to marry your site. Is it going to marry you after the first date? Probably not. Is it going to marry you after a week of dating? Probably not. It needs to see more and more of you to trust you. So the more content you create, the more you're updating the content, the more you're putting out content, the greater extent Google will say, "Hey, I know who you are. I'm ready to marry you." And that takes about it could take a year. Just stick with it as long as you're creating good content that's structured, it's good for users, it's not thin, it's substantial content. Google will start to because it's indexing you, right? It's crawling your site, it's indexing you. It doesn't want to waste that resource for no good reason. I love that. Google's only going to rank you if you see clicks. You mean to tell me Google is crawling and indexing your web pages and basically wasting all of those resources? It wants nothing to do with you until people start clicking on you. Google wants to rank you. It's crawling and indexing you. It's spending a lot of money on your website. It wants to rank you. So give it the opportunity by creating content.
absolutely. There is another question. How do we create brand with content? Can you give examples? Something that you wanted to cover? Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you like an example. I used that when I was at Rank Ranger. So we spoke a lot about, we wanted to create, it's actually a really good example because our entire content strategy is very organic. And the idea was to position the brand as an authority. Because we positioned ourselves that it made sense for our brand. We had a lot of data. We were tracking millions of, they still are. Rank Ranger tracks millions of keywords. They have a ton of great data. Let's share that with the SEO community. It'll position ourselves as an authority, which is what you want because we're a data provider. You need to trust us. I mean, you need to really trust that the data that we're providing with you is not crap, that you can rely on it, right? So the content branding or the content strategy was about supporting that. It was about supporting the idea that you can trust us with your rank tracking data. And we'll show you data. We'll use data. We'll use data for insights. And it'll be spoken about on the major SEO websites. It'll be linked to in the major SEO websites. So it was about creating deep studies, deep content, substantial analysis, not like, you go to your typical SEO website, 5 ways to do this. That was exactly what we were not trying to do. And we had a nice, listen, it's a strong domain. We probably could have written those kind of websites and gotten a lot of traffic. But that's not what we were looking for. We weren't looking for traffic. We were looking for brand authority. So then when people thought about us and we decided, hey, we should maybe use them, they were willing to trust us with their money and their data. So the entire content strategy was about leveraging deep A, studies, and B, SEO analysis. So the kinds of content we were putting out there was really long form, really intricate, really detailed. We'd rather put out a post that was really significant once a month than putting one out once a week. I mean, we were doing it very often because we were able to. But if I was faced with those two ideas, no, I would rather go once a month, something really substantial, because it comes off to the reader as this is something that's really, it's something I can rely on. I trust these people. They're not putting out content willy-nilly. They're not putting out content just for the sake of putting out content. I read this and I can very clearly understand that they're creating content because they want to put out something substantial to the reader. So that says a lot about who are these people? Well, they're really substantial. They're really authoritative. It's really interesting content. It's something I would like to trust them. And so the way it could go from anything from tone to the actual substance you're writing. If you want to be, if for whatever reason you want your brand to be thought as fun and interesting and engaging, the kind of content you create tells you that. You could say we're fun, we're engaging, all you want, but if the content you're putting out there is boring, then you're not fun, you're not engaging. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you could put it. You could have a banner on a website. You're paying for advertising. You're showing up. You have all these banners on Google Ads. We're a really exciting, really engaging brand. Look at our great banner. It's really exciting. They go to your website and it's boring. Is the user going to say, "Well, I saw a great banner. It was really exciting"? No, they're going to look at your content. Your content is you, and you are your brand. They're not separate. You can't separate them out. They're one and the same.
Yeah, in fact, when you were saying fun and engaging brand, I could quickly recollect MailChimp. They are fun and engaging when you see them in your mailbox. They carry their persona on their Instagram with real human pictures, and the same is communicated through content. They are really witty, and they do a really
Yep.
good job in doing what you're saying.
Yep.
Another example that comes to my mind, like you said, for Rank Ranger, I think HubSpot is another platform which where whenever I think of a reliable resource, I type HubSpot space. This is the content query that I want to look for, because I know someone out there is trying to solve the problem that I have, and
Yep.
they might have actually went through, the writers might have actually experienced those problems, because the content that they produce is actually empathizing with me as a customer.
Correct.
So
Correct.
yeah, yeah, it
Yep.
absolutely makes a lot of sense. And thanks, Manisha, for that question. We have another follow up on this good analogy about marriage. Basically, no matter what the question, the answer is always create more good content.
You really cannot get around it. There's nothing. There's no shortcuts to this, because at some point you can't just paint lipstick on a pig. People are going to realize it's a pig. There's
Yeah,
something
yeah.
you brought up before, by the way, that I wanted to jump on. Now I totally lost my train of thought. Nuts. Wait. So when you're talking about brand, there's a lot that goes into this that you have to really consider, right? MailChimp is a good example. They put out really good content. Their brand is fun. Their brand is engaging. I'll give you an example. Another really good example, like oh, this is what I want to say. People fall into this trap with acquisition content because they're so focused on the acquisition that they lose their entire brand. And I see this mistake over and over and over and over again. Stop worrying about the acquisition at the detriment of your brand, because that's a very short-term strategy. And by the way, it won't work with search engines either, because search engines will go right through that. Yes, by the way, search engines can understand tone. If you have a page, by the way, let's say a loan page, you're offering information about loans, small business loans, and you throw a lot of marketing talk into that page, and the page is not meant to be a sales page. It's meant to be a page where you offer information. Google can pick that up. They'll understand, hey, in your title tag, you're writing information about small business loans. And then on the page itself, you're writing, get the loan now, best loan ever, buy it now, give us your money. Google understands that, and they understand, well, we don't really trust this content. So it doesn't work with
Google
search engines
understands
either.
the intent,
It
intent
understands
behind
the
what you're
intent.
doing,
Yes,
like
and part of
humans.
the intent is your tone. You can tell intent by tone. And Google's getting very good at doing that. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater by going after acquisition when really you should be speaking about long-term brand strategy. This is what I mean. Like, when you focus on your content as a brand, you'll end up doing things for the long term. When you focus on your content as acquisition, you do things very short term, and you end up doing very spammy things that don't work. They don't work with your users. They don't work with search engines. It doesn't make sense. I'll give you an example from Wix. So we're revamping all of our SEO education material, all of it. It's supposed to be coming out with a new SEO education hub in the coming weeks. And the reason we're doing it is because we realize, you know what? A lot of the SEO education content is really acquisition content. And that's not good for anybody. It's not working with search engines. It's not working. It doesn't help our users fundamentally. That's the real issue. You're trying to supplant the user with acquisition content when really they need education content. So we have to change the entire tone of our content around SEO education. So we say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to hire a bunch of SEOs. We're going to ask them to write a bunch of beginner SEO content and advanced SEO content that's all about education. It has nothing to do with acquisition. And by the way, the nature of you, and I cannot understate this. The nature of your content all depends on your intent. If your intent is acquisition, no matter how much you try to make it a more substantial piece, it will always be acquisition content. Fundamentally speaking, it will always be flawed. If you're creating content for education, your intent should be to educate. And you have to be honest with yourself about that. I'm not saying you can't throw acquisition elements in there. You certainly can. But if your intent is to educate, then it better be to educate. Because if you're really trying just to do acquisition, that will come across in your content and it won't work. And it won't work for your content with searches, and it certainly won't work with users because they'll see right through you. And that's what I mean when I'm talking about building brand. If you're trying to educate your consumer, Make sure your educational content is exactly that, educational content, because otherwise you'll position your brand as not being trustworthy. I see what they're doing. They're trying to educate me, and what they're really trying to do is get me to buy something. I don't like that. I feel tricked. I feel fooled, and I'm not going to buy it from you because I don't trust you. So I don't mean just like brand identity. I mean the very, very basics of having a strong brand, which is basically being authoritative and being trustworthy, is through your content. Because everything else is on the surface. All the banner ads that they're going to see on whatever website you're advertising on, whatever social media posts they're looking at, all of that is very, very surface. It's very top level. Your content is what people actually think of you as. And you can't fudge that. You can't fake that.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is acquisition should be side effect of your content creation and shouldn't.
Yeah,
Is
there's a
that
time
correct?
and a place. There's a very limited time and a place for acquisition. And there's a right way to do it and there's a wrong way to do it. So let's just say for the moment there's two problems. Like one is people get the time and place wrong. Assuming you've gotten the time and place right, you're not trying to sell. And this is what I saw. I just recently wrote an article with Surgeon Journal about this. I saw during the product review update that Google released a couple of weeks ago in the middle of April, or beginning of April rather. Was it middle or beginning? I'm terrible at times. Beginning to middle of April, Google released a product review update. And one of the things that I saw there was, if you have a website reviewing products, if they use that kind of sales language at the top of the page to get you to click to their affiliate links, Google caught that and it demoted the page. It devalued the page of the search rankings because Google was, hey, look, this is not an acquisition page. This is an information page. And we understand you're going to have affiliate links there, but it shouldn't fundamentally change the nature of the page. So assuming you don't do things like that, you have the time, you have the place right. This is a time and a place where you should be pushing the user to acquire something. There is a way to go about it, right? You could have, let's say it's a landing page. You're going to push the conversion. You could have one CTA. You could have two CTAs. You could have 200 CTAs. Having 200 CTAs is a bad idea. And I think people do this because it all comes down to psychology. You feel anxious. I got to drive the conversion. The second you create content where you're thinking, I got to drive the conversion, because you have that anxiety, stop, because you're going too far. You can't force the conversion. What your job is to do is to bring the user right there, to understand the product, to understand the need, to want it, and then let them decide on their own. The second you get anxious, and you really have to know yourself when you're writing, and you try to push it too far because you're anxious about making sure you get that sale, you should stop, because you're going to end up going too far with it. I think you're still
Absolutely.
on mute.
Yes, seems like search engines are more intelligent than we think. Of course, they are, and they are continuously evolving. And the question says, can you list out some common parameters does Google look for other than just website traffic?
So again, they don't look at site traffic. Google does not look at site traffic. They don't look at pogo sticking. They don't look at bounce rates. There's a lot. I understand why it makes sense for them to do it. There's a lot of reason why they wouldn't do it. For example, let's say I search for what's the weather today, and I go to a website. I click. I see the temperature, and then I leave. So the bounce rate, it's unbelievable. I'm not going to other pages. The time spent on site is like 2 seconds. Yeah, but that's what it's supposed to be. So those metrics are really complicated. And I understand that Bing does look at them. I don't know how Bing looks at them, but I would imagine Bing is still more focused on good content than pogo sticking. So I'll say that. The second thing is, like, they're intelligent to a point, and you have to be careful, because sometimes stupid things that you can do matter. For example, let's say you notice you're trying to rank for I don't know, best sneakers. Just going back to sneakers. And you happen to notice that every single page ranking on Google has the word best in it. So that tells you there's a gap. This is an area on the web that Google hasn't really reached yet with machine learning the way that it really has in other places, because it's throwing up these pages because they included the word best. Then you should do the same thing. If you see Google being basic, which at certain times they are, they're not God. There's going to be times where they're basic, and then you should do those basic things because that's what Google wants. In general, though, that's not where things are. Those cases are few and far between. And while that may work now, you should be very careful because that's not where Google is going. So to quote Wayne Gretzky, a famous hockey player, skate towards the puck. What is Google looking to do? What is it trying to do? I think one of the Googles recently, Paul Har, I think it was talking about SEOs love looking at what Google is doing. Oh, well, Google's looking at links, and Google's looking at links, and it's trying to determine authority of the page, and blah, 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 and it's ranking based on links. Versus why is Google doing that? Why is Google looking at links? Well, Google's looking at links because it doesn't have a better way to trust its website. But let's say in theory, Google did have a better way to trust a website, i.e., understanding the content itself. Then Google would theoretically demote the importance of links and upvote the importance of the content, of under having good content, which is what you're seeing now. So if I can give you a general trend, like there are things that are more direct and things that are indirect signals. Links are an indirect signal. I am not saying links are not important. Links are extremely important. What I'm trying to say is links are a crutch. Links are a crutch because Google can't understand the content itself. If you were to ask Google, hey, if I can perfectly understand this content, 1,100%, would you still look at links? No, like we wouldn't need to. We would understand this content like a person would, and we'd say, this is relevant, this is not relevant, this is good, this is bad. Google's getting better at doing that. So what you want to do is create more content that's really specific, really detailed, really nuanced, that speaks to a very specific user. Look, it's your basic business strategy. Right? You have let's go back to shoes. Most shoe stores are not Nike, or most shoe company, whatever it is, you're not Nike. Nike can target shoes, but you need to target a very specific user. Nike can target everybody, but you have your profile of who you're targeting. Just like you're trying to target a very particular profile of user as a business model, that's what you want to do with your content. That's what you want to do with your website. And that's what Google is looking for. If you were to Google where to go on vacation, depending upon your country, you might get a filter that says summer, fall, winter, autumn. Meaning Google says, if you're looking for a vacation, most likely you know a particular season that you want to go in. Well, everything's different. If you're looking to go in the winter, where we're going to recommend you to go is totally different than the summertime. So even though you might rank for best vacation, or you might rank for where to go on vacation, you're number one. If Google's showing a filter at the top that has the seasons, most people are going to click on that filter. They're not even going to see you. They're going to see the content about the season they chose, right? So if they chose autumn, like the background here right now, the user's going to see content about going on vacation in autumn. Where's the best fall foliage? Where's the best place to go if I really want to see colors on trees and blah, 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 blah. And they're going to skip over the more general content of where to go on vacation in general. So Google's telling you forget the algorithm, the way that Google constructs the SERP itself is telling you we're trying to give the user a very specific answer, whether it be an answer on the result page itself or through a website. We're trying to direct the user to a very specific place with very specific content for a very specific intent. And Google's trying to refine that intent right on the page and redirect you without you having to enter a new query. So if Google's telling you we're trying to give the user very specific content, then as a content creator, that tells you you should be creating very specific content. And whether or not Google's doing that right now for your particular keywords or not, it's something I would still consider in general, because at some point it's going to come to your particular keywords.
Yeah, and I think Molly, it adds up to your point where you said that you are not serving to one customer or one kind of customers. And like you said, there is no linear path. It's
Right.
always people jumping here and there in their journey and using search, using Facebook, using Insta at different points in time. So journey is no more linear. Two, we are not serving to just one kind of customer, so their needs, their phases are different. And that kinds of bring us home to the point that you were just saying, that if I'm looking to travel somewhere, for instance, I might be looking at something like affordable stay. Another person might be looking at various places that they should visit. Another person might be looking at more, luxury stay option. Another person might be looking at nightlife. So you see, I am serving maybe stay or travel related product or content. However, my customers at different point in time are looking for different things. So that adds up to the point that we should again go back, empathize with the customer, what kind of people are using my platform, and then create content. And that, I think, kind of beautifully connects with the entire conversation that we are having.
Yeah, that's a great case, by the way. Like here, let's say your website is all about vacations for senior citizens, and you want to target best vacations for the best nightlife. And let's say you get that keyword, and people get to your site and they see everything else you're doing is about senior citizens. Like, why would I book a vacation through you? Why are you even writing this content? Or the reverse, a senior citizen gets to your website and they see, yeah, best clubs to go clubbing at in Miami. Like you totally don't get me, which goes back to the idea of your content and branding. Your content is branding. And if your branding is off, everything is off. You're a website for senior citizens. You're talking about like the best place to go clubbing in Miami. If you want that kind of vacation, I'm not going to book a vacation for you. If I'm trying to book a vacation as a senior citizen, I'm not going to book a vacation for you. You totally don't get me, which goes back to empathy. So it's all the same thing. It's all like one circle of content, however you want to describe it.
Yeah, and I think one example that's coming to my mind, I would, of course, speak to friends who speak in my language. So if we share common interest areas, of course, I'll more often talk to them. Whenever I have a problem, I'll reach out to them because they understand me, they get me.
Yep.
Suddenly,
Yep.
if someone is talking something random that really doesn't interest me, might go very rarely to them, and that's what Google will do. I
Yep.
think that's absolutely the point here. We have another question, and the question says, how should we keep up with Google algo updates? And from where can we understand where Google is going through these updates? Yeah, a
Cool.
very
So that's
common
a great
question.
question. This is my favorite topic. I read a lot about the algorithm. Um, First off, there's a couple of people you should probably read. So definitely check out Search Engine Land. They always have pretty good coverage about what's going on. SEOroundtable.com, Barry Schwartz's site. Marie Haynes, Lily Ray, and Glenn Gabe in particular are three people I recommend that you, or myself, but I'm going to plug myself, keep up with when there's an algorithm update that comes out. I can tell you since the core, we'll call it the core update era, which in earnest began in August of 2018 with the Medic update, although the core updates that Google started to announce, of course, core updates before this began in March of 2018. So since that time, every single core update, and I've looked at every single one of them, the overarching pattern is Google getting better at profiling your site. It's saying, doing something like this, saying, okay, you're a site for senior citizens who want to travel, yet you have all of this content about clubbing. Pretty sure senior citizens don't go clubbing. What's with your site? Why would we rank you? In other words, Google's going to say, okay, so your website is about helping senior citizens find vacation spots, but you're talking about clubbing. Senior citizens don't go clubbing. What is your website doing? It has no identity. If it lacks an identity, well, how do we trust you? We don't trust you. Right? If Google's saying your site's about senior citizens and vacationing, and you're showing me content, let's make it even more extreme, about mechanics and fixing my car. Well, what are you really doing with this site? Are you a website that's really about vacationing? It doesn't seem so. So why would we rank you? You're clearly not authoritative. You're not trustworthy. The example that I give is, imagine you walked into the doctor's office and you went up to the reception. You said, I'm here to see the doctor. And the receptionist said, are you here to see the doctor about your throat? Or are you here to see the doctor about buying a falafel? Like, you sell falafel and you're a doctor? Yes. Would you want to go see that doctor? Why is a doctor selling falafel? That makes no sense. So if your website's doing too many different things, Google won't trust your website. keep on target, stay within your zone. Don't go after those high search volume keywords because they'll bring in traffic. Because ultimately speaking, Google will penalize you. Penalize is a bad word. Google will demote your website's rankings. And they say they do this. They say, hey, we look at a website and we can tell there's different sections to a website, different topics that the website deals with, and we look at and profile it. Well, this website does really well with this topic, so we'll reward with good rankings. This website's really terrible with this topic, so we're going to kill off its rankings for this topic. I saw it with the last update. CNET. One tool provider said that CNET gained rankings after the last update, and one tool provider said they lost rankings. How is that possible? Well, because their news pages gained rankings and their review content lost rankings. Because Google said for news content, they're doing a great job. For review content, they're doing a crappy job. And Google's able to profile which is which. Google's able to say and profile news versus review content. What is news content supposed to sound like? What's review content supposed to look and sound like? They're doing a great job for news content. Looks and sounds perfect. For review content, looks and sound like crap. So we're going to demote the website's rankings. So again, think about your site holistically. Think about its identity. Goes back to branding, because identity and branding are the same thing.
Absolutely, makes so much sense. And I think another important point that you certainly mentioned there, the content depth is super, super important. Especially, I think when we are starting, I love this use case of Amazon, how Amazon started. They started with books business. They went all in, and then they started, when they were established, they started expanding to other businesses. Yeah,
Yes.
that's not just SEO. That applies to our knowledge, applies to brands, applies to businesses. I think even if we are trying to be a personal brand, that means as a personal brand, you would want to be known for something, one thing. And then once people start listening to you for that one thing, because if you're blabbering on a lot of topics, it becomes a blabber. And
Yep.
if you want to be known for one thing, you need to start with something very specific. I think that's a very important point. And when we are creating content for our business, we should keep in mind that we start with that focus. Is that
Look,
correct?
there's an old phrase, if you grab too much, you grab nothing at all. Imagine trying to grab a handful of, coins. They're all going to slip out. Go after that one coin, get it right, do it right. Which, by the way, it's all about trust. Fundamentally speaking, whether it's a search engine or whether it's a consumer, it's fundamentally about trust. Because if I can't trust you, I won't rank you. If I can't trust you, I won't buy from you. And the only way to build out trust, again, it goes back to that marriage thing. It's a very, very slow process. And it takes time and it takes investment. It takes investment into your website. It takes investment into your content. The biggest mistake I see people making in general is that they don't invest the time into their content. And I talk to our users at Wix all the time about this, and it's my biggest advice to them. My biggest piece of advice to them is focus on your content, create something good and sustainable and strong. I see it all the time. In the SEO world, I see it all the time. I see who's posting a piece every single day, and I immediately don't trust them. Outside, okay, if they're a news site, that's a little bit different. But if they're, let's say, an SEO blog, or if they're an SEO tool provider, or if they're an SEO agency, whatever they are, and they're putting out a piece of content every single day, I immediately know it's thin, it's cliche, it's not going to add, real value. Of course, it's not a general rule, but for the most part, I'm sorry, it's not a 100% rule, but it's a general rule. They're putting out 2 or 3 paragraphs, they're spitting out content really quickly, and I don't trust them. I don't look at them as authoritative. If you're trying to build a brand outside of, say, selling fast food, which I guess anything where your product is not worth $1, you need to build trust and authority to a very, very large extent. And that's just slow.
And that makes so much sense, Mordy. And I know a lot of businesses that outsource writing. Naturally, so a lot of businesses do that. Nothing wrong in it. But what happens is when you outsource, or even if you are doing internally, even if you're not outsourcing, is many a times what you have hired is content curator rather than creator. So when you have
Correct.
content curator, and I think you would agree to this, that when you're hiring curators, they are just thinking keywords. They are thinking, how do I cover this topic in the most comprehensive would be a wrong word, because they're thinking more like, how do I make it long, how do I make it cover everything that the first three pages are doing,
Correct.
instead of thinking empathy that you mentioned in the very beginning.
Yep. Look, the age of the ultimate guide is over. I'm not saying there's not room and space for an ultimate guide to whatever, but during the December 2020 core update, I saw this. Very, very strong health sites, like .govs, were losing ranking to like Healthline or WebMD. Why? Because a .gov page, let's say you were searching for, I think this was actually one of the examples was our painkillers, something to do with I forgot the actual keyword, but it had to do with painkillers being safe. So there was a .gov page that had it on there, but it had it on there as part of a whole other set of content. So first you had to scroll past topic A, and then topic B, and then topic C, and then finally you got to that topic about painkillers being safe. Those kind of pages were losing rankings to pages that spoke just about painkillers being safe because they were more relevant. I cannot expect this. By the way, it's probably my biggest point these days. You are the expert. You're the business owner. Okay, you're going to hire someone to write content for you. They are not an expert. I understand why you do it, and I'm not saying you can't do it correctly, but fundamentally speaking, you are the expert, and that's why, by the way, Google I think is doing things to give small businesses a greater market share on the SERP, because Google realizes that who's the expert here? The actual business. And they need to be in a situation where they don't have to worry about all this SEO stuff all the time. It's not saying you don't have to, but they need to be able to focus on writing good content. And Google needs to be able to show them that, hey, you can write good content and rank, which is I kind of like what I feel really passionate about, or kind of why I feel fortunate enough to be working at Wix, where I'm in a situation where I can help create a foundation for people where they can build a website. They can have their website being taken care of foundationally for SEO. So take advantage of that. Take advantage of that and use that so you can focus on writing really, really, really good content. I can't overemphasize that because there's so many websites out there and the content is just very thin. It's not substantial, and there's no reason for that because you're such an expert. So leverage that. Write the content.
Absolutely. And in fact, I have used Wix in the past many times, and I love it. The
Thank
simplicity,
you.
the how intuitive the platform is, really love it. So guys who are watching this, who are looking to start own business or build a personal brand, Wix is a very good starting point. Yeah,
Yep.
lot of plug and play options, very intuitive.
I'm biased, but I like to think that it is because there's a lot there for you to design. We do a lot on the SEO side. In the last year and a half, we have put in an absolute ton of effort into the SEO side. There's a ton of things that are available to you there now that were not here a year and a half ago. Wix has done a lot to take care of you from the SEO point of view. So use that. Use it, leverage it. I'm not saying it just has to be Wix. You want to use another CMS, whatever it is, but leverage the CMSs that are available to you so that you can focus on writing content because that's how you're going to differentiate yourself.
Absolutely. We have another question, a very good one. As a content producer, if content or brands, if content and brand is everything, is it useful to hire digital marketing or SEO person? If yes, what responsibility should they own, and what should I, as a brand or business, own? How do we evaluate good marketer?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. I would say that the whole, if I can be bold enough to say this, I think the role of the SEO is rapidly shifting. I'll give you the absolute SEO answer. It depends. Your website might have technical needs that you need to fix. You've blocked all of the crawlers, all of the bots from crawling your site through. You've completely fouled up your robot.txt file, and you needed someone to come in and fix it. By the way, check if you did do that. Check your CMS. Like with Wix, you could just restore to default. But let's say you really had a problem there, or there's a technical problems with your content. There's markup whatever it is. So you need a technical SEO, and you need to have them come in, and you need to have them run audits on your site and clean up those issues. I would say for the most part, if all things being equal, the technical aspect of your sites are taken care of, you're not in an overly competitive niche, meaning things like site speed come into play where all things being equal, all the content is the same. Google sees there's a ton of great content out here. All the content is wonderful. All the content is great. It's all coming from great sites, but this site's a little bit slower than that site. So, okay, so that's where you're like having someone come in and optimize your site for page performance, for speed, really comes into play. And if we're not talking about those kind of scenarios, then you're talking about somebody coming in and giving you direction and strategy. How do I think it's like the same reason you would hire a marketer in general to come in and give you advice? How do you best present your information to your users? Let's say you're off digital, right? You would hire a marketing firm to do TV spots because you don't know how to speak to that. How should my messaging be? What should my strategy be? You really want an SEO to come in and say, hey, if you want to target search engines, you need to create a lot of topic clusters. You need to create, where's your, to help you find that opportunity. Where's that opportunity for you? Well, you know what? I've gone through this niche. You write about, autism. That's a topic you write about. I've gone through all the autism keywords for you. I understand the SEO should understand how Google deals with that topic. I'm using this as an example because I did a study about this, because Google treats autism as a subtopic differently than it does as heart attacks. So you need an SEO to know that, right? You need an SEO to understand that the way Google is profiling this subtopic. Hey, for this subtopic, I noticed Google's doing this and not that. Your opportunity is here. A good SEO, a good digital marketer will help you find the right opportunities for growth and then tell you and align it with your overall branding, your overall content strategy, and say, okay, for search engines, I recommend you write more content about this to build identity. And of course, there are the smaller elements. Hey, use internal linking here. You should use internal linking there. Small, I'll call it top level optimization. Your title tag is really too vague. That still is important, but I think the real value added is in finding opportunity, understanding how search engines work for your specific vertical, and helping you find that opportunity and align your content to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think very good question and very good answer.
Thank you.
Um,
Good question. Yeah, it is a good
yeah,
question.
yeah, and I think the like you said, SEO role is constantly evolving, and I would also like to stress upon that there is a lot of research work that goes behind SEO. Like Mordy
Correct.
said, that you need to understand two things. One, you need to be really good at researching what consumer or customer or potential leads or whatever you call them they are looking for. So
Yep.
that research work, a huge Excel file with the clusters that Mordy mentioned, will be done by these SEO folks. That's one. Again, the empathy part is covered in here because this is what people are looking for. You won't be able to just ask customer everything and know, because I might not remember when I'm talking to you in your focus group interview that I made 30 searches before deciding on this location. So this insight, even I am doing at a very subconscious level. So that your SEO will bring in that subconscious information that Google knows about you, that SEO will bring in. And the other part is that Google is constantly evolving. Someone asked that question,
Yep.
that how do I know how to keep up with that Google updates? It's extremely difficult because Google is huge. There are over 200 or 300 factors that are used to do ranking. And as a business owner, as a marketing head, as a content person, you might not be able to do all of that. It's a lot to consume, understand, and keep up
And it's
with.
very
So I think
holistic at the same time, right? It's not just, hey, this factor and that factor. It's what's Google trying to do with those factors and
yes,
understanding that. So you might have memorized all 300 factors, but an SEO will be able to come in and say, hey, let me help you understand what Google's trying to do with these factors and how you can align your site with that.
absolutely, absolutely, love it, love it. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And we have another question. I have a lot of content published on shared media. In this case, shared media could be Facebook, Quora, etc. But now I am building my own website and brand. How do I leverage that existing content which is elsewhere?
So, I mean, I can tell you from personal experience. I'll tweet something out and be like, wait a second, that would be an amazing blog post. Let me dive into that more. So, and you don't even realize until after you put it out there. So, go through your old social media content. See, okay, what points have I made over time that I can now collect? Let's say you've tweeted about or you post about one particular topic, but all sorts of different points about the particular topic. Well, could you create a unifying theme out of that? Make a blog post out of it? So there's a lot of ways you can repurpose that content. Obviously, it depends on what you're doing and what's out there, but what you've done. But that's one way off the top of my head that speaks to me that I've done multiple times.
So what I hear you say is you're saying that repurpose the content, don't use it as it is.
I mean, all things being equal, the content that you have on social media is probably not going to be substantial enough for web content. Even if it's a Facebook post, I mean, maybe it's one really, really long Facebook post. So you could, tighten it up a little bit, add some headings in, and be good to go. I would imagine that would be, few and far between where that would actually make sense to do.
Yeah, so let me, even I have a follow-up question because I write a lot on Quora. I have a lot of articles published there, and they are articles in some shape and form. So they have significant length, and Quora is also getting indexed on Google. So SEO is already an objective for content writing there. So how do I repurpose that content, if I am creating a website? Do I copy paste? In fact, the question, yeah, basically copy pasting is a strict no, yes. How do we go
I
about
wouldn't
it?
copy and paste it. I would try to create something with unique value. That's maybe a little bit differentiate. Like if you're competing with Quora, no qualms against you, but most likely Quora is going to rank there, and who knows what content they're going to show because Google's saying we want forum content here. There's when you see a lot of forum content ranking on the SERP, it's because Google says we want forum content. Like that's the intent. So take that topic and sort of see how you can maybe spin it to a situation where it's not. Or Google saying, "Hey, we want to show content from blogs, not from Quora, or not from Reddit, or something like that." But again, like you never really want to copy and paste. I can't imagine. I mean, look, maybe you've done a LinkedIn article. Okay, so that might be something you could theoretically copy and paste. Just you have to, take that as not just because it's a LinkedIn article that's really prolific. Think about the user themselves. What do they expect from a blog post on your website? How might that sound or need to sound or be presented a little bit differently than just a LinkedIn article? And not just a LinkedIn post, but a LinkedIn article where, yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm looking at the articles, I'll click on your article, fine. If I'm going to your blog, to your post, to your home, how might that need to be different?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the question when I think of publishing one content from one place to another is how much energy and efforts I need to again put into
Correct.
that. I,
Correct.
I think that's why this question of repurposing comes again and again. Oh, can I just copy paste because it will save me time? And, but I think that's a lousy job. Like you said, that the intent on a forum kind of portal would be very different from a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post or a website.
Yep.
This thing, and also I think keyword integration, etc., are not considered when typically you're writing a post or answering to a question, which needs to be considered here, and that's where SEO role comes in, where you need to do a little bit of research if you're trying to rank.
Yep.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. All right. So I think we are almost 8 minutes of the time,
Oops.
but I
Sorry.
thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, Modi. And
Yes. Thank you for having me.
yeah, and I think we should totally do another session on Wix if
Okay,
you're
let's do
okay
it.
with that.
I'm down. Let's
Yeah,
do it.
yeah, yeah.
I'm here.
So
That's literally my job.
yeah, so it will, I think, help a lot of people. I know a lot of my viewers are people who are starting up, and Wix is one platform. As I recollect, when I was starting out, it really helped me get a lot of understanding of how these things work. So I would definitely want us to cover that topic, and especially this conversation was really very enjoyable. I am so glad that you're here.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast talking to you. I could talk content and the algorithm and all this stuff all day long, but an hour I think is good.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, all right. See you all in the next video where we will have Mordy again. We'll talk about Wix. Thank you.
Bye.